Nobody says this is a guilty pleasure about things that have a predominantly male demographic.
For some reason, I don't know why it traumatized me, but like it's the reason why I'm scared of owls.
It basically asks the whole time, if this is what it takes to be great, is that okay?
And I would just imagine like being like a pop star.
You can't keep doing shitty things and then feel bad about yourself like that makes it okay. You need it to be better.
As we were going to the carnival, she went and bought me shoes.
But mainly it just taught me that love doesn't have to last forever to be meaningful.
Does representation actually matter?
Dude, the Nutcracker slaps.
That's what I was going to talk about. I'm actually exposing myself.
It's like basically one big, hashtag YOLO film. This has transported me to another time.
Honestly,
Welcome back to another episode of Similar Differences. In today's episode, we will be discussing all the media, so the books and the movies and the TV shows and music as well, that has helped shaped our identity or has had a huge impact on our life. And it just basically meant a lot to us. So hopefully you guys can get some new recommendations through this. Before we begin, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and the Wadawurrung people of the Darug Nation, whose land on which we record today, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders listeners with us today. Always remember not to say that out of habit and know whose land we are recording on today and know that sovereignty was never ceded.
All right, thanks, Inez. So I just wanted to start off quickly, actually, just before we get into everything, just talking about our week and how it's been going. Myself, I might sound a bit funny on the recording today and the podcast. Hopefully it doesn't come through too much, but it's because I got my wisdom teeth taken out. So yeah, my apologies if there's just some words where you're like, what is she saying?
I finished my bachelor.
Hooray!
I know that's pretty standard for a lot of people right now, but especially getting through a degree in this time and like being the first in my family and just thinking that I could never get to this point is a big deal for me. And it sucks that I couldn't have like a big party like I wanted to. I just had to like hit submit on my last assignment. I'm like, oh, that's it. It's a little anticlimactic,
I know.
But I'm still very excited, and I have a really nice, very chill summer planned. My birthday's coming up soon. I'm going away. Yay! So, Angelica, what has been the media that has shaped you?
I guess we'll start off with like books. There have been plenty of books that have impacted my identity and who I've grown up to be. Even currently this year as well, books that I've engaged in have shaped how I think about myself and how I think about the way that I navigate society. I grew up not reading a lot of books that were from authors that look like me or from my background, and I think that's a problematic issue that we can get into later if we want to. For me this year, I tried to challenge myself to read books that were written by like African authors and Black women in particular. My all-time favorite author is Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I am in love with this woman. One in particular that was my first ever book that I read from her was Half of a Yellow Sun. It's just a story about Nigeria and just navigating the challenging times, in particular during the civil unrest that happened in Nigeria. And it just got me I just became so fascinated at how narratives were written in a way that wasn't Eurocentric, in a way that didn't frame Africa, Nigeria, more specifically as in need or this terrible place. Like the strength of the country was shown through the book. And for me, that was such a big turning point in terms of how much I valued my own country that I wasn't born in, but I'm from. I felt much more connected to my identity from reading that book. And from there, actually, it got me into wanting to even write, tell the truth about my culture. And that's what I really loved. Another one of her books is Americanah. If there's a book I have to recommend anyone read from her, it's Americanah. It is so beautiful, the story that she told. And again, it was so authentic to the experience of African people in the diaspora as well. And so I really enjoyed reading a story that I could kind of also relate to. Inez, what about you?
Mine are more, maybe not necessarily what have shaped my identity, but maybe have been like tools in my toolkit for things that I haven't really learnt because I didn't have like proper role models or like very interrupted schooling. So a lot of the things that I had to educate myself on were ones that I needed to understand myself. So this first one is a little unusual. It's called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. So basically, Chris Voss is a hostage negotiator and has worked for the FBI and like teaches at an Ivy League school about negotiation. And yes, the FBI. Look, I have problems with it too. um, there's some things where it's like, I was in Iraq, and I'm like, okay. I think take the anecdotes so much out of it, and just look at like the theory and everything that he's teaching you about negotiation, because really there is nobody else better to teach than a hostage negotiator. It taught me that all of life is negotiation. And if you think about it, maybe it's not good negotiation, but conflict is also negotiation. Trying to make an appointment is negotiation. All of life is a negotiation. So figuring out how to do that properly and well, particularly in social work and just in general life, is really, really important. And one of the key takeaways was that there's something called labeling. So when you label somebody's emotions and you like repeat it back to them, you can put the negative emotions on the table and have a discussion about them. So if you're like really worried about, I don't know, your friend is like being distant, instead of having like a resentful conversation or passive aggressive, just say it on the table. It's like, hey, I know that you've felt really distant, and maybe I have not been the best friend to you either. But if you just put all the stuff on the table, you can actually have a discussion about it. And so I actually have started implementing that. Other thing that really stood out to me was when you are negotiating, if you put a if you give a number with a zero at the end, so like 100,000, it feels more movable, like easily changeable, than if you put a number with that like feels like it's come from like an exact calculation. So you like 1,237 and 51 cents, even though it might not be. That's wild. And I feel like you kind of know those things, but having it put down on paper, you're like, oh, of course. The one thing that I have actually implemented, and it sounds a little like jarring, is if like somebody like doesn't reply to you, or like if you're in a group project or like a work project and it's just not moving forward and it's getting really frustrating, just send send a reply that's like, so have we given up on like trying to make this project a success? I actually did send it and it does work. People
Really?
reply, yeah, people reply immediately. Do it in your own time, but judge whether or not that's a good thing to do. But yeah, he also said like it probably sounds really jarring, but people usually commend you for your ballsiness. And they're like, oh, they actually want to do well. But yeah, just take what you want from it. I think it's great. All of life really is a negotiation, and it teaches you a lot about compromise.
Wow, I love that. You know what? I want to find a situation where I can use it.
But you can. You're read everything.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so the untethered soul. Yes, look, it's a little cheesy, and it's about how to free yourself from your mind. But I was struggling with so much anxiety. And after reading this book, I recognized what my inner voice was like saying about me. And I never really paid attention to it before, but because I didn't have a very good therapist. But this book truly acted like, in a way, a therapist probably should have. Uh, but yeah, I was just going through a rough time, and I was just trying to understand myself. And I don't know. I think something about me was like, I want to learn about spirituality. I swear to God, after reading this, my anxiety left my brain. Diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. I'm not saying at all this is going to work for anybody else. I had to be on medication too. I don't understand what happened. I'm not saying this book cured me, but it did something to me that at least helped me understand
Mm.
that my mind like never really rests. Mainly it taught me about my subconscious, and it made me recognize, yeah, that your mind never really rests. Like your inner voice never really rests. It just talks and talks and talks, and it just goes from like one anxious extreme to another. The other thing was like, if you have a bad thought and really start paying attention to it, and you keep asking like, yeah, and like if you're like, oh, you're such a loser, nobody loves you, and then you're like, yeah, why? Or you just keep asking it questions, and then eventually it has nowhere else to go. It helped me realize like these are my thoughts, and just because they are thoughts, it doesn't mean that they're actually true. I don't have to actually identify with them. But yeah, what about you?
I find that so interesting. It really, I love when books just transform that side of you that you just, especially those inner thoughts,
Yeah.
that for me is quite fascinating. And I think this is a totally different like spectrum of, of books,
Yep.
but as I think about the way that this one transformed my inner thoughts and inferiority complex that I had within myself, it's and also my ideas of like race and violence and that sort of thing. I feel like this book that I'm about to share like relates a lot to your experiences. And the one that I read is it's controversial for like many reasons, but it's a really old book by a Black psychiatrist called Frantz Fanon, and it's called Black Skin, White Mass. Not to say that you're going to agree with everything that's in it, but in this book, he's really talking about the violence that's experienced by Black people, and he kind of breaks it up into two parts: the impact on the colonizer on individuals, and by individuals I actually mean like the physical body and the physical and the actual mind, how that is destroyed over time. And then he also talks about the use of violence to retrieve back that identity that's been destroyed by racism and by genocide and violence from colonizers. A lot of people couldn't relate to like a lot of the things that were being shared, but I could relate to a lot of the first part, which talked about that alienation of like the physical psyche and the physical body as a result of racism. He talks a lot about how racism and colonial violence is used as a force to destroy the self-dignity and self-respect that a lot of people had. And he was talking about African nations in particular. He talks about violence as the only means of being able to reverse the state of victimhood that the
Wow.
colonized persistently experienced. And I found that interesting because in today's society we're like, no violence, sick of violence. What I find interesting about Fanon's novel is that he represents the side that is for violence as the only way to destroy what colonizers have done to us. Then the other side people like to compare him to is Gandhi, who is
Uh,
who is the supposed person for nonviolence. And people like to like compare the two and do this whole like which is better between the two. And
I'm so
Ga-
angry.
yeah, Gandhi is problematic for a whole lot of reasons. If you do not know,
He didn't
because
liberate India. One, two, he's super sexist. Three, super racist and preyed on young women. And it was Indian freedom fighters who actually helped liberate India. It wasn't him. He was just a pawn for British colonialism. La 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 la. Sorry, Angelica, but
no,
he's not.
that's exactly like what I was going to say. Like, it's the fact that the argument for nonviolence that he supposedly like, pursued during his time is always used as like this way of like, oh, we should follow what Gandhi did and we should, but Fanon presents this other side that talks about the fact that the only way to free like he calls Black people, he referred to Black people as the way that colonizers referred to us. So he was like, the only way to free the native from his inferiority complex and from his despair and inaction is to make him fearless and restore his self-respect through the use of violence. The same thing that the colonizers used as a cleansing force. And I found that like, oh my God,
Yeah.
like I just find it so like interesting to see his perspective of violent acts. And then I started to think about, okay, well, the history of genocide that's occurred as a result of use of violence in places like the continent of Africa. This is where Fanon's words have been turned around on him, where people go, okay, yeah, if we're going to use violence as the only means of cleansing and having a collective catharsis from everything that we've experienced, then genocide is acceptable as well, because then we're going to cleanse our society from, a lot of his words have been turned around and flipped on his head and taken in a way that assumes that violence, I guess, is always the answer. And I think I've kind of come to this point where I'm thinking, what is the answer like to responding to the impact of colonialism that we're still experiencing today? Is it violent force? from the people who have been oppressed? Is it non-violence? What exactly is effective? And to me, like, I feel like a lot of those things are not clear, and it's very like based on different contexts and different systems. Like, how do Africans actually achieve liberation? Where we're at right now in Africa is terrible because of the violence that we're now perpetrating on each other as a result of colonial violence and the ripple effect of that violence that we experienced. And some of the things that he describes about racism and the pain that it brought onto his body and his soul in the first part it just made me cry every time, just to see what he was saying. Like, he was talking about, constantly wanting to skin himself, constantly wanting to shed himself of people looking at him for his just as an animal, and destroying his humanity. That really shaped a lot of what I thought in terms of violence, non-violence, empathy.
So thank you, Angelica. I have another 4 books, but I won't take up too much time. Books are probably the things that changed me the most. So for impact and identity, I just want to focus on them. I honestly didn't want to include this because I'm like, I know this is a goddamn white savior book, but it really did impact me. And it's To Kill a Mockingbird. I'm so sorry.
I am done. I'm
Look-
sorry. I have to say this from the bat. Every time we read that damn book in high school, I wanted to throw it at my teacher.
Yeah.
But anyway, continue.
Yes. Like, I am so aware of how problematic it is for a white woman to be writing around race, and how Atticus Finch had to save them as if they couldn't advocate for themselves. I'm aware of all of this. However, my little brain didn't know any of this when I read it.
Yeah.
And I think it just meant a lot to me because I was constantly like calling the police to try to get, this family violence situation sorted. Nobody was ever listening to me. And the community kept saying, like, what are you doing? There's no point in doing any of this. So I don't know. It was the first time I read a book and I was like, well, this this lawyer is human rights lawyer is doing whatever he can, even though his entire community is not being supportive. And if he can do it, maybe I can too. And yeah, I don't know. That just meant a lot to me, to be able to see somebody who was like fighting even though nobody else believed in him. Looking back, of course, I hate it, but at the time, it did shape my identity. It's called When by Daniel H. Pink. That's a cool name. But it's basically the science of perfect timing. This is also another one of
Ooh.
another one of the things that I would put in my toolkit. And he basically uses a bunch of studies. We say timing is everything, but we actually don't really understand what timing really is. And then once you read all these things, it makes so much sense. So he says, how some people might be productive at night, in the morning, and how we could use that to benefit ourselves. So the things that stood out to me was like doctors and lawyers and judges and important people make their best decisions early in the morning. The best time for a job interview is to be the first one in the morning. So basically, it's like a productivity book, but it also tells you that you should always try to do like your group presentations first, go in for the first job interview. Yeah, and just like a lot of the science behind that. So that's really great. These two are quite recent reads, but they definitely have changed the way that I have felt about myself. Basically, it's The Body Keeps Score, which is by Bessel van der Kolk. And it basically is like the effects of trauma and how it actually holds on in your body for years. It helped me understand that, it takes so much energy for your body to hold on to the memory of terror, like not just in your mind, but also in physicality, and how important it is to actually feel safe with other people. Like, it has a huge impact on your body. I think we all know that as trauma, but I think the longevity of how trauma can hold on to your body is just really fascinating. If you're interested in trauma and trauma-informed care and just yourself, I think it's a really, really important read. If I would recommend any book from the entire list, I think it would be that. Honorable mention, I read this probably a month or two ago, but it truly was wonderful. I've read a lot about palliative care, just through social work and studies, but this is called Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. It's a book about aging and like dying with dignity and having autonomy. And it just asks for honest answers, to what really matters in the end, what is mortality, and when to say, that's enough. I don't want any more like medicine. I've lived my good life. And it asks a lot of challenging questions. And that the ultimate goal in the end is not a good death, but also a good life.
Another honorable mention, I'm so sorry. But like um, anything by Toni Morrison.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Big up.
Yeah, anything by Toni Morrison. Like that's I don't even have to explain. Just look her up. So we're going to move now into talking about some of the films that have impacted us. And I don't want to sound like very stereotypical here, but Black Panther was very emotional for me. So
No, of course, that doesn't sound silly at all.
yeah, I just like that movie was incredible. I'm a very big Marvel fan, so anything to do with like comics, like I've just actually been in love with. Yeah, I just thought it was beautiful. Like every single one of the actors did an amazing job in their respective roles. So
I think the most important one is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and it's basically Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet, and they try to erase each other from their memory, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful film. I've watched it. I think I watch it every year, but it was the first time that I ever realized. But mainly, it just taught me that love doesn't have to last forever to be meaningful, and a lot of relationships don't have to last forever to be meaningful. And it also taught me how kind of ridiculous love really is as, a concept. I'm not going to spoil any of it for you, but you can't help who you love and and even with friends, you will mess up but to love regardless and, to learn and just keep moving forward. And also it's just that's the first time where I watched a movie and I was like, whoa, this is a screenplay. Like I bought like the
yeah.
screenplay and I have it in my bookshelf. But yeah, it is really beautiful. So that's another one. What about you, Angelica?
Okay, so I'm I am very embarrassed to say this, but like
Never.
I I there's multiple reasons why these impacted me, and
Yep.
this is me very really 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 young.
Yep.
So I really loved Barbie.
Cute.
And for some reason,
Dude, the Nutcracker slaps.
that's what I was going to talk about. The freaking Nutcracker is the best like Barbie princess bloody film that is out there. Anyone can fight me. Like I
Wow, what a curveball. I did not expect this.
I just for some reason that movie, like when I think about like things that I used to really like, I used to really want to go back and watch as like a younger kid, it would be that. Like I just love the way that it was done. There's a scene in there that actually for some reason, I don't know why it traumatized me, but like it's the reason why I'm scared of owls. Like I'm like there was like an owl like in like I remember in the movie, and it was like on some big like clock, those clocks that ding
Yeah.
at like 12 or whatever. I don't know. Ever since then, I don't like owls. They're beautiful, but I just I just don't like them. But that movie is honestly like beautiful. And I will sit and watch it again. I will probably watch it today. God, like in all honesty, like it impacted me because I started to then appreciate like those types of films. Like I really liked, like even though I wasn't like represented, so to speak, in the film, I just like appreciated. I appreciated like kids' movies a bit more, how like interesting they were, the narratives, and I've always felt like the Barbie movies like just came up with the most random like storylines, and I would just be like, okay, like,
You're not wrong.
yeah. And so yeah, that one just really shaped my interest in that, and also ballet. Like I don't know, I just found like it was really
Awesome.
cool to learn about ballet in that way, appreciation
Awesome.
of the arts in that form from
Awesome.
from that film from a young age. So that too,
Yeah.
and I guess just adding into that as well.
Also, while you were saying that, basically all I was thinking was nobody says this is a guilty pleasure about things that have a predominantly male demographic.
Mm.
Let's just think about that for 1 second. Do do you ever hear people say, "Oh, it's a guilty pleasure. I just love football." Um, everything's guilty.
Yeah.
Everything is guilty if it has a predominantly female demographic. Chick flicks, pop music, all this kind of stuff. Barbie films.
What amazing pickup. That is so true.
It is true. Is
Yeah.
your guilty pleasure cars?
Yeah.
No one is saying that. Or like my guilty pleasure is like chicks in swimsuit models. Like nobody's saying any of this.
Yeah.
So try not to use guilty pleasure. You just like what you like, and stuff a lot of the time is popular for a good reason. Leave that shit in the bin.
Yeah.
I could speak about this movie. I could do a whole podcast just alone on this movie. But it is Bend It Like Beckham.
Oh, mm.
I feel like every single South Asian young woman will tell you Bend It Like Beckham is like it's just a phenomenal film.
Yeah.
But and particularly because I was living in London, I was also playing soccer, and I am like a Punjabi woman, and I can't tell you the joy it brought to me seeing somebody that looked like me, and that like I also had a bunch of posters of different soccer players on my wall. So it was just really lovely, and it just showed the art of balancing cultures and actually trying to get what you want. Yeah, it just showed the importance of having people around you that really believed in you but didn't push you outside of like your cultural norms. Because if you remember, Jonathan Rhys Myers, bless his handsome face, but he he comes to like he just wants Jess to like really be part of the team, but he just presents her with opportunities, and he like goes and like tries to understand her. He never like pushes her outside of her culture. Like when the scout is when the scout's like there, and he's like the scout will be there tomorrow, and she's like at her sister's engagement. He's not like, you need to be there, like you're missing out on everything. He's like, it'll be there, you have to go after what you want sometimes. And he's just really respectful. And I really appreciate that in a white man. um, but also, he understands like why his dad doesn't want Jess to be a part of the soccer team because he was discriminated against in his cricket team because he was wearing a turban. So obviously, that racism runs true, and he just wants to protect his daughter from it. And like Joe understands that. And then at the end of the film, they're all playing cricket together. Ah, my heart. It's so sweet. It's just so sweet. And it's just wonderful to have like Gurinder Chadha is like an amazing director, and she just captures the essence of it all really well. It's just nice. It's just nice. Jess got a happy ending in the end, you know? She she just got what she wanted, and she still had to work hard for it, but yeah, it was just really sweet, and it just means a lot to me, and it makes it feel so good. Banging soundtrack, oh my god, I used to play that soundtrack all the time, and like I stepped on it. I stepped on the CD, and like I genuinely cried. I was like, what am I gonna do? Remember when CDs were important? Jeez.
Yeah. One more film that I will mention in a bit more detail is Freeman, and that is a documentary film about Kathy Freeman. And so Kathy Freeman is someone I used to, and still do like just adore. I used to stick images of her on every single book for kindergarten.
Yes.
And I just appreciated her story. And her autobiography was actually the first book that I ever read properly in full. And I just appreciated this documentary film just talking about her life and what running really meant to her and how she just lived and breathed it. And it just reminded me and made me so nostalgic of the times that sport was such a safe haven for me, and sport was such it was just a place for me to just shut out the rest of the world and just run. You just forget everything, and even if you come last, whatever, but it's just like those moments in between races and those moments in between like different events as you're preparing for stuff that you start to really come to understand yourself and self-doubt that you have and why you do the things you do, or like just and how to psych yourself up. And just watching that documentary reminded me a lot about why I would participate in the things that I did. And I watched it this year. It brought back a memory for me in high school where I was that desperate to go to like to still participate in, I think it was like the what we call our Sydney West carnival for people who've made it to like the third level stage of athletics, right? Couldn't get access to the shoes that I would need to be able to participate in this type of race. And this was like 100 meters and 200-meter race. And one of the teachers, actually, there was one teacher, her name at the time was Miss Carr, and she invested so much in me just to be the person that I wanted to be in terms of sports. Like her heart for like the passion that I had was so much. And I came and I was in my school shoes and in my sport uniform, but I was wearing my normal like black leather school shoes. What do you like? Where are your shoes? And I was like, I'm just going to run in these. I don't have shoes. And she was just like, what do you mean you don't have shoes? It's like, and I just told her like my dad wouldn't buy me shoes. Like I just had to, but I still want to run. Like I still want to go there and do the thing that like I love doing the most and try to win. Like I love doing that. And she was like, oh my God, like there's no way you can run in those shoes. And then she went, as we were going to the carnival, she went and bought me shoes. And I just
so sweet.
I remember like running and actually like winning, and I was so excited because then it was the first time that I went to the state level for this specific race.
Hell yeah.
And I was like, just watching Kathy's documentary and just how she talks about the people that invested in her, and then also how she now invests in younger people as well, so that they can achieve the futures that they want. It just brought back that memory of that time where I was just in a situation that was so violent and toxic, and yet I was trying to conceal it so much, like that what was actually happening. But it was the first time really that I actually had to tell someone like that I didn't have something that I just needed. She just turned that around and just invested that in me, and
That's
so that
beautiful.
I can do that. I just watching that documentary made me realize that there's people out there who really care about your passions, and they'll just come and surprise you, and sometimes you just have to be vulnerable, and allow that. But also Kathy encountered a lot of racism and a lot of struggles being an Aboriginal woman, and I did as well, doing the sport that I loved. The person that I thought would be the least likely to help me, who did help me. And I love that documentary. If you're interested, if you're a sports person or you just like want to learn more about like Indigenous icons, definitely go and watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a sweet story. Oh my God. That's so lovely. It's warmed my heart. First one is Whiplash. And it's basically a drummer in a dramatic music school. It was at a time in my life where I was like, success and money and power mean everything, which is also why the second film is also really important to me. Obviously, it takes a level of skill and determination and just effort to just be at that level. I was no drummer, but I was just wanting to be excellent in everything, and I didn't really matter how I got there. And I was working a bajillion hours and hardly getting any sleep and trying to be the best friend and the best girlfriend and like everything. But particularly when it came to work and study, I felt like I just was going at 120% all the time. It's an incredible film, regardless, as a standalone piece. But what I got from it is like, it basically asks the whole time, if this is what it takes to be great, is that okay? And that's what I constantly just kept asking myself. And I always think about that when I'm speaking to myself. It's like, is this almost like masochist level of ambition ever really worth it? And what am I really striving for? You know, what is like successful enough? And these are questions that I never really asked myself. Looking at Miles Teller on the screen, like bleeding all over a drum kit, you're like, Jesus Christ, like that is obviously bad. But for the whole movie, you see him just trying so hard. People are being so unbelievably hard on him. It's all just about success in the end. So these are just questions I never asked myself, and I think these are questions you should ask yourself too. Is that if the point that you want to get to, or everything that it takes to get there, is that really okay? Because every time I feel myself pushing myself too hard, I think about Whiplash. And then the other one is an Indian film. It's called Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, which basically means you'll never get life again. It's super cheesy, but I love it. I love it so much. Basically, it's like three friends who promised to go to Spain together, and they go to different cities and they don't really know which one they're going to, and they have to
Yeah.
pick a adventure sport when they're in there. So it's like skydiving, snorkeling, but it just teaches you a lot about friendship. And again, there is one character who like wants to retire early, and he's like working in London, and he's like classic like ambitious businessman, but like his life's falling apart kind of character. I feel like you know what that means.
Hmm. Yeah.
Everyone's like, work less, it was my birthday, and I was like, no, but I had a deal. Like it's yeah. It is really really corny, but throughout the whole time they all learn to face their fears, and they all know that friendship is like the most important thing. The man who wants to retire early, they don't like make him out to like be some villain. They're like, well, his family didn't have a lot of money, so he just wants to provide for
Yeah.
himself and be able to enjoy his life. He just keeps saying like at 40 I'll retire, or like 40 or 50 or whatever. And then people just keep asking, what if you don't get that? And
Mm.
he was scared to swim, and then he like snorkels. Is that a verb? He does the snorkeling,
Yeah.
and then he's on the boat, and he's just like crying. And it's like probably the first time in the whole movie we've seen him like shown any real emotion. Like a character asked him, like, have you ever cried when you open a paycheck? Why is money so important to you? And I was like, oh my God. Yeah, it's like basically one big, hashtag YOLO film. But it is true. You only do live once, and maybe you don't get tomorrow and all this cheesy stuff. But um things are cheesy, and maybe they're said really often because there's a lot of truth to them.
Yeah.
And ambition is good, but I don't think it should take over your entire life where you're not spending time with people that you love. So yeah.
Yeah. Moving on to TV. Like when I think of things that I just found so fascinating to watch as a kid, they just pop up in my head. I always loved cooking shows,
Cute. Yeah,
but
me too.
but the very first ever cooking show that I watched was Iron Chef.
It's intense, dude.
It's so intense, but I found that I would get so fired up as a kid, like especially, and they would show it, I believe, on I think it was showed on SBS or something like that, and that was like the only show that I would just like love to secretly just go and watch. Like I would just
Yep.
like try to go and like and watch it quietly, or just find something to watch it on, and then and just get so like riled up when like the chef is chosen and like
Yeah,
and be
yeah.
like, yeah, oh my God, it's this chef again. Remember, like that was like one of the first ever cooking shows that made me interested in cooking and interested in food, and wanting to like know a bit more about like how things are made in different cultures. And I just love that there would always be like a theme
Mhm.
or like a specific like ingredient. I feel like, oh my God, how are they going to do this? Like, I don't know, it's really random, but I really love
No,
that.
it's beautiful.
Yeah, I really love that show. The bloody Cheetah Girls films.
Yes. Oh my God. Absolutely. Yeah,
I
amazing. This has
and
transported me to another time.
honestly, like some of the girls that I used to hang out with, we formed like a Cheetah Girls group, a group
Yes.
based on the characters. And so we would be like, I'm this person, then do the dances and all that type of stuff and practice practice the songs. But I loved the Cheetah Girls. I just found it like, out of all the like, I think it's a Disney, yeah,
Yeah,
Disney.
yeah.
Out of all the like the Disney kind of like teen films, like it was the one that I could relate to. And I remember when they traveled to like different countries and all that kind of stuff, I'm like, I want that life, I want to be able to like, and I would just imagine like being like a pop star and being able to like sing in like Paris and Italy and
Didn't we all? Didn't we
yeah.
all?
I think just going off the fact that Raven Simone was in the Cheetah Girls, That's So Raven was another show that I absolutely loved at the time as well, from Disney Channel. I would watch that religiously. and I don't know what it was with me, like trying to like act like these people, but I would go to school and like stand there and be like pulsate my eyes as if I was trying to create like a many times I would do that so randomly, like when people are not looking, and just try to like yeah, and do the whole like
Love
head
it.
switch, head turn,
Amazing.
and everything. I just wanted to like live those lives or have those powers. An Australian TV show that I always just used to try and model as well was H2O,
Oh my
just add
God.
water. The one with the mermaid. I'm actually exposing myself for like in
You were
this episode.
hitting me with so many curveballs.
Yeah, but
Wow.
like I
His show is
remember,
great though.
honestly, I remember being like, every time like I would see water, I would I did the same thing with like the Avatar: The Last Airbender show as well, but like I used to always love the power of water, and I would like look at water and try to like move my hand to try and like freeze it or lift it up and be like and just in my mind think I'm doing something when I'm really not. I'm just
Yep.
embarrassing myself. But and also like try to be a mermaid in like the swimming pools like every time I go to swim. So and I know in like my high school that was such a big show as well.
Yeah.
And people would be like, I'm this girl, I'm this girl, I'm the girl who freezes the water, blah blah blah. God damn, that was such a weird phase. But but I absolutely love that show at the time.
Yep.
One on Netflix that I really love is because it touches a lot on the problematic issue of Black identity in churches is the show Greenleaf. The hidden things that happen within the institution and what it's become. It depicts like this whole big family that runs like this big mega $1 million problematic church, and all these like hidden things have happened inside it. And it really challenged a lot of like how I think critically about navigating like the church community and the church environment, being the religion that I identify with. Yeah, Greenleaf I absolutely love, and I don't know whether you'd call this a TV show, but I guess because it's in several different parts. When They See Us, I can watch that
Yeah.
over and over and over again, as sad as it is. I remember the times where my cousins would talk about just the vilification of these men, the exonerated five,
Mm.
in the media, even after their releases. Like it
Yeah.
was, I just found it to be so, especially that last episode.
Mm.
Oh, it took a lot out of me.
Yeah.
It really did. But it's definitely a must watch, as well as the show Chewing Gum. I don't know if anyone's watched Chewing
Yes.
Gum,
Oh
but
my
yeah,
God.
yeah,
Michaela. Yes.
yeah. Absolutely love Chewing Gum.
Yeah.
Massive honorable mention. Like I just find that show like
Yeah.
absolutely
So
hilarious and
funny.
amazing.
Have
Yeah.
you seen I May Destroy You?
No,
Or I
not
Will?
yet. Not yet.
Are you joking? Oh my
I
God. We should have a viewing party because
oh yes. Yes, yes, yes. Because I've that's on my list to watch. I've been desperately wanting to watch that.
yeah, it's phenomenal. Very
Mm.
difficult, but it's
Mm.
amazing. Just quickly, I think yeah, the good thing about I May Destroy You is that you think that a lot of areas of consent are grey, you know, but once you
Mm.
shine a camera on them and you film them, they don't look so fucking grey. It's pretty
Yeah.
clear that it's like, black and white. If somebody says yes once
Yeah.
and then they say no again, and they just have so much of that. I think it's a really
Yeah.
important watch. I have two. I have so many TV show recommendations, but for ones that have
Yeah.
like actually impacted me, or have made a real change in my life, it's probably just these ones. Number one is BoJack Horseman. I know
Mm.
that's an animated show about an animal universe. It's basically an alcoholic horse. Um, but like it's really funny the way they I know it sounds ridiculous, but I think the good thing is like because the characters are animals, it's easier to relate to their behaviors and their characteristics. Like you can't visibly relate to a horse or a cat. Um,
Yeah.
but you can relate to like their characteristics. And I think that level of separation is really important actually for that show.
Mm.
Yeah, the most important thing I think it has really taught me is that, you can understand why you are the way that you are, or you can understand why somebody else is an asshole, but,
Yeah.
you know, their bad decisions have still hurt others and you still have to hold yourself accountable. Sometimes it is your fault, you know?
Mm.
Like people say, it's not your fault, it's fine, or like try to justify it. Sometimes, no, it is your fault. I think I've watching that show, I've had to look back on, things that I've done. And I'm like, well, maybe I was trying to make myself the victim in a situation. And truly, maybe it was my fault,
Yeah.
not in a, not in a derogatory way or trying to put myself down, but actually try to see where you have gone wrong as well, And there's a thing that Todd says to Bojack, and he's sorry, I can't even say it. Just like it's rough, but he basically says you can't keep doing shitty things and then feel bad about yourself. Like that makes it okay. You need it to be better.
Mm.
Are you joking?
Wow.
Wow. I know.
Wow.
Yeah, no one is under any obligation to forgive you. Closure is like an elusive concept.
Mm.
that I don't know, I don't think anybody really ever stops pining for, but really you have to get it for yourself. But basically, like Bojack apologizes for something horrible that he's done, and he expects. I think like we all do, we apologize and we expect oh no, it's okay, or like I forgive you. But he's like, no, I don't forgive you. I'm not going to give you closure. You don't get that. You have to live with the shitty thing you've done for the rest of your life. You have to know that it's never going to be okay. I'm not going to be your prop so you can feel better. It's a hard show to watch, honestly. It's not a feel good show. It doesn't follow like normal narrative plots, and it doesn't make Bojack a better person. And even with the redemption arc that comes, even after like he goes to rehab, and he's like, no, but I'm a different person now. And it's like the people that you have affected before still remember you as that person. It doesn't matter how good you become. Yeah. So I think there's just a lot to think about with that show. And also it's just so funny. They have so many like animal puns, and yeah, it's just really well written. And yeah, probably the show that's had the most impact on me. And the the other one is called Pushing Daisies. Has anybody watched this show? But it's um it's so whimsical, it's so
Mm.
quirky. Basically it was just like the biggest escapist show in the whole world. The cancellation of this show was the biggest snub in fucking like TV history.
Aren't like most, oh, what the hell? Aren't most cancellations?
Yes,
Like,
truly. I was so upset. But basically it's about why do I consume so much about death and mortality? This is a running theme that I've seen throughout all my media.
it's
Jesus
so
Christ.
funny. Like I'm like I'm seeing so many themes like come out of like the things that I've said. I'm like, what the hell's wrong?
Yeah, me too. I'm like, am I okay? But basically it sounds ridiculous. A lot of shows just sound ridiculous, but it is a guy that makes pies. And he has this he has a superpower. Basically he touches somebody, he can bring them back to life, but if you touch them again, then they die forever. So
Ooh.
yeah. But it's just so absurd and so surreal, but it truly is like some of the most beautiful television I've ever watched. I don't know, it's like it's really clever and it's really stylized, but like the narration just makes me feel like I'm just like being read a story.
Yeah.
um and it was truly like the universe is so strange and so absurd that it's like you can't help but think about the stuff that's going on in your brain. Like you have to like focus on like what's happening here. And it's just so there's a town detective, and it's really great. And I would recommend it if you just want to escape and like forget, especially this year. Go back, watch Pushing Daisies. It's not for everybody, and it's not like I'm a quirky TV show. It
Mm.
actually is really 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 good. So yeah, that's another one. As honorable mention, it's called Lust Stories. It's on Netflix. I think it's four or five separate stories about women in India and how they navigate their sexuality and marriage, and they just touch on a lot of things that have been really taboo for a really long time, like open marriages or sexual desire, slut shaming, all this kind of stuff. And the focus is just on the women and their stories. And I think it's really beautiful. And I feel like, a lot of people that put Indian women into the submissive box, or, what you think women from developed countries look like or how they feel, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like knowing that they have similar desires and, the nuances of, yeah, sexual desire and like slut shaming in that kind of community is really important. And then they also have another one, which is like the male version where they have four different male stories. I think it's called Bombay Talkies. They're on Netflix. Definitely go watch them.
Mm.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah.
It is so hard to pick, but I'm just going to quickly add two more. One- this is so okay. I'm just going to mention them. That's it. Hidden Figures. Absolutely love that movie. Yeah, told the story of three iconic women and just the devaluing
Beautiful.
of Black women's identities. And the movies that impacted how ratchet I can be are the Medea films. For some reason in high school, that's all we focused on and we would repeat all the time. So that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. so many great music recommendations, but the most important one, for those of us that have listened to our first episode, is Riz Ahmed's The Last Goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the main reasons why the podcast started, number one. Number two,
Yeah.
it helped me realize so much about myself and my Indian identity. Yeah, and realize that Australia really is like a toxic ex that you really just want to break up from, but just can't. I think it's a beautiful metaphor. It's a wonderful like piece of album.
Mm.
Incredible. And the other
Yeah.
one is The Internet's Ego Death. I listened to this a lot in when I lived in Sydney, and it just epitomizes like confidence and self-worth. And if you could listen to any songs on that album, I would say Girl, because it's just like, you better know your worth. And just saying I tried is just about no matter how much you try, you just got to let things go sometimes. And it was just like a wonderful breakup album. And it just went through everything that I was feeling, and it made me really feel like hot shit. And then Kate Renata's 99.9%,
Ooh,
banging album. Oh, fire. That was probably
absolute fire.
and also his newest album Bubba is also fantastic. But 99.9% was the first time where I was like, I want to be a DJ. And then I started doing that. So yeah, those were things that really made me feel happy.
Ones that stand out to me is the Straight Out of Compton album by NWA.
Mhm.
Anytime I want to be aggressive, but can't be aggressive.
Yep.
I'm playing that album because I just love it. Like every single song like there, it's
Mhm.
just makes me just want to go and like I just punch the air. Like and I'm like, yeah, like, but then
Yep.
still be nice and calm. I also love anything by Solange.
Yes. Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, I watched her live and she's just exquisite.
Yeah.
Like
How does she move like that?
I
She's
know, like you just see the audience trying to like
yeah.
do the same thing, and you're like, everyone stop. No, but
Yeah.
like, no, I love it. A Seat at the Table. I
Yeah.
absolutely love that album so much. And all the rest of her subsequent albums too.
Yeah.
Honorable mention. I'm not going to mention every single one, but anything by Beyonce can just be played like for days on end for me.
Yeah.
But the other album that had an impact on me of recent was African Giant by Burna Boy, and that came out last
Yes.
year. And like I'd always like, of course, being Nigerian, I've always loved Nigerian music, but
Yep.
I think over time I've seen like so many different artists, come out of Nigeria and really be prolific, like Wizkid, Davido, Burna Boy, Tiwa Savage, all these people.
Yep.
And they're all inspired by like the iconic Fela Kuti. Burna Boy in particular, this album was just something different that just encapsulated a lot of that artistic sound from Fela, just bringing in the new different modern sounds from of like right now. And so I play that album constantly all the time because I just think it's a beautiful piece of work. Moving on very quickly, what we did want to touch on is we've shared a lot of different things that have impacted us that in different ways, not just our, I guess, ethnic identity, but just how we think, how we navigate society, and just ideas and new ideas that come into our mind. I guess for you, and a lot of the things that you shared, there were some that had people who were like you or just kind of represented you. And I know for in mine as well, there, it was the same thing. So I just wanted to ask, like, given everything that we've shared, does representation actually matter?
I think it matters, yes. Like Benjamin Beckham obviously is probably the one that comes to my head the most. It made me feel happy that there was somebody on the screen that looked like me that could share a similar experience. And yeah, I obviously felt seen. However, I also just want better representation, I don't just want, an Indian movie made by a bunch of white Hollywood executives that is crap. And then I have to be applauded because I'm like, oh, look at this. Look, there's a person in a sari in India. And I'm like, yeah, it's a shit movie though. I don't want to watch it. But like I should feel really like proud and excited that I got the crumb of the cake, I just don't want to settle. Like, why am I pining for validation through like Hollywood,
Yeah.
What about you, Angelica?
It's a tricky one. I've tried to break it down in my head because in relation to different areas, like I definitely think 100% representation is needed and matters in order to be able to identify different experiences, like for example in politics and whatnot. But also there's nuances to that, and there's, like you said, it's like who is representing, what actually are their values, what do they project, what do they agree with, what do they disagree with. And my issue sometimes with representation comes with the fact that when you have that one Black person who's succeeding, they become like this big martyr, and like no one else can be in this position because we've already got one of them. Some of these people will not bring up others so that the industry is being representative of differing types of people.
Yep.
And so I definitely think representation it does matter, and especially when I think about myself as a younger kid, perhaps a lot of the struggles that I had with identity could have been changed because of what I was seeing for on-screen stuff wouldn't have impacted me as much.
Yeah.
And maybe our perceptions of disability would just be a bit more embracing and accepting and less discriminatory if we had different representations of disability out there for us to visibly see. And who is controlling the representation is also my issue. Like who is behind the scene? Because the representation is the people behind the scenes also need to represent, as well as the people who are on screen. The music has to be, the artist can be representing my experiences, but the people who are behind the scenes controlling the masters and the access to the money and and all that kind of stuff, are they just like rich white men who are just, again, continuing this cycle of white superiority? You just have to think about it in a really like careful way, that you're not just idolizing people and being like, yep, that's the person that represents all Black people and all of their views.
That's a fantastic point. Absolutely. But I also know that it starts very early. And yeah, as you said, with like young children, and I think the thing with media and why it impacts us all so much is because it's an informal tool for education and learning about yourself.
Exactly.
And how you think about the world, particularly with disabilities or transgender issues as well. What we see through the media definitely impacts us in real life. If there's informal sources of education like media really is, if those things are not represented accurately, that's just going to be a complete detriment. I think the main thing is representation, it does matter, but I think we all just expect more. They can't just be the one Indian actor or the one Black actress in, it just has to be better. And I don't want, because the whole thing about representation is like you're still representing in white media predominantly, I don't want to be represented in my media. I just want to be represented in general, I think we all just want more from our representation, and it starts early and it's an informal source, and we just need it to be better. I just don't want representation through the means of white validation.
Exactly. That's so true. Maybe I've struggled with the idea of representation mattering because certain representation in like some forms of media, I've been able to kind of critically understand myself and be like, I'm absent here. Why am I absent here? Like weirdly enough, it's like made me think about the systemic issues that and why I'm not represented. Like I don't know, I just come to understand myself a bit more weirdly. But also I feel like in different forms of media, I sometimes give a different answer to this, because in terms of books, like in my personal opinion with representation matters is yes. Like I'm sick to death of the Australian education system, like perpetuating just like
I don't want to read any more Jane Austen.
Thank you, God. We should be encouraging literature that was written by authors in different contexts, and also about different contexts as well.
Absolutely.
Like that should be, for me, that's also really important.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, I think that's probably a question that all of us will have different answers to that will probably keep changing, and that's
Exactly.
okay. I haven't formed a definitive opinion on it,
Mm,
probably because I just don't really know, and I think I would have to think about it more. But yeah,
mm.
so yeah, definitely share with us on social media if you think representation matters to you and what the nuances of that question is. But thank you so much for being here today and listening, and we hope that you have a fantastic day and also reflect on the media that has impacted you, because there could be some that you didn't even think about, and that was probably the case for both me and Angelica doing this. But yeah, thank you so much. Please follow, please share it around, and yeah, have a great day. Bye.
Bye.